the most controversial moment in the presidency of Donald J. Trump. It is revealed that Donald Trump likes his steaks well done.
Mr. Reagan.
What a rube. A primitive, unsophisticated brain with an utterly underdeveloped palate. I actually read an article by a seriously arrogant prick. By the way, food critics in general, frauds. This is a con job. This is not a real job. They're arrogant morons who think, well, if you don't like what I like, then you have no taste. Okay, these are con men, and nobody should pay them for liking particular foods. This is moronic. So anyway, this guy writes why we have to worry that Donald Trump likes his steaks well done. And so the whole premise of his article is that, like, there is no possibility in this guy's mind that any human being could prefer a well done steak to a medium rare steak. In his mind, medium rare is the standard, right? It's generally accepted by all chefs. Medium rare is the only way you can have a steak. If you have a steak well done, that means that you just haven't tried a medium rare steak. That's his assumption. Well, let me tell you about a guy that I know that likes well done steaks. And he's not an idiot. He's a really smart guy. Me. Okay, I like my steaks well done. So screw you, Mr. Food Critic Guy. So I used to eat medium rare steaks, always, because when I was growing up, it was kind of considered manly to have a steak that was kind of rare. So as I grew older, I started learning a little bit more about food, and I heard about marbling, right? What's marbling? Marbling is fat that's integrated into the meat. So if you get a well-marbled steak, it means it's kind of a fatty steak. So I started to buy different kinds of steaks with different kinds of marbling, and what I found was, if you cook a very well-marbled steak, medium rare, the fat doesn't render very well, and unrendered fat is kind of gross, right? It's like eating raw fat is gross. But if the fat is rendered really well, it's like got the, I forget what they call it, the Maillard effect, right? The Maillard effect is when you get that searing on the outside of a steak, right? It gets all really brown. If you can sear a steak very, very nicely and cook it all the way through and has that marbling, what'll happen is that fat kind of melts in and then fries up the steak, and it is absolutely delicious. You just put salt and pepper on it, the best way to have a steak. And you know what kind of steak I buy? The absolute cheapest steak. I buy chuck steak, but you gotta cook it all the way through. To me, if I find any piece of pink in there, it tastes a little irony, right? You get that kind of blood taste. And I hate that taste, right? It's a bitter, unpleasant flavor. The irony taste, right? The taste of rust. Now, so the reason that chefs like steaks medium rare is because usually what they're cooking is like a leaner piece of meat, right? And if you cook it all the way through, it really dries it out. But with a well-marbled steak, you don't have that problem. So, I mean, I don't know what kind of cuts of steak that Trump's getting, but if it's well-marbled steak and he's getting it well done, it's probably phenomenally delicious. Now, Trump also has it with ketchup. Okay, I don't understand that at all, but a lot of people eat steak with barbecue sauce or A1 sauce, and that's not that far off from ketchup. I think that we associate ketchup with like macaroni and cheese or cheese sandwiches or stuff like this, McDonald's hamburgers, and so people kind of associate ketchup with childhood. So they think, oh, you know, Donald Trump must have the mind of a child if he has a steak with ketchup. Okay, I would say this. Perhaps that's how Donald Trump had it as a little kid. And maybe Trump was a little nostalgic. Okay, apparently, according to the same writer, Donald Trump prefers the meatloaf that his mom used to make when he was a little boy, and that's all he eats when he's at Mar-a-Lago, right? I love that. That's just endearing. That's lovely. I love that, okay? He eats the meatloaf his mom used to make. That's just wonderful. Does this man not have a right to nostalgia? We all indulge in nostalgia, okay? The 80s are so big right now. If you watch Stranger Things, you have no right to criticize Trump for eating ketchup with his steak. Nostalgia is a beautiful thing. It allows us to sort of take comfort in our childhood, the beautiful days of childhood, and to maybe remind us of our parents who maybe we've lost. For somebody to criticize Trump for remembering his mother, to me, that is like the sickest kind of criticism. This guy is a complete degenerate and should lose his job. Not that he should have that job anyway. Being a food critic means you're a fraud. Let the guy eat the steak however he wants to eat the steak. In fact, if I go to Washington, I'm gonna have a steak right with you. In fact, I'll cook you a steak. I wanna have steak with Donald Trump. We can both have it well done. It'll be a beautiful moment.
Mr. President, in talking about the continuing recession tonight, you have blamed mistakes of the past, and you have blamed the Congress. Does any of the blame belong to you?
Yes, because for many years I was a Democrat.
But does any of